What do you want me to talk about? My work or what needs to be done? Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm originally from India and I have a very interesting background. My bachelor's degree was in engineering. So I studied electronics engineering and computer science.
In India, right? You
Yeah.
studied
Then I did an MBA in strategic management. Then I worked in the corporate world for 3 years. And then after that I came to the US to do a PhD in organizational behavior. So it's part of management. But to me, coming to the US was like joining the army. The slogan in the US is, be all you can be. So I thought that in India, you can only be three things in India, at least when I was in India. Engineer, doctor, or loser. So I didn't want to be a loser. I didn't want to be a doctor, so I had no choice. So I became an engineer. But in the US, you can be whatever you want to be. So I reinvented myself and I moved away from business and stuff and I did a master's in international studies and went to Georgetown University and did a PhD in international relations with minors in philosophy and Islamic political philosophy. So all this was before 9/11. So my whole job was basically, I was more interested in doing political, not so much as IR theory, but international political theory. That's what I wanted to do. So my dissertation was like that, even though the book is titled Jihad for Jerusalem, it is actually a very theoretical book which modifies constructivism. So one thing I realized was that I'm a believing and practicing Muslim, so I didn't want to have a disjuncture, a disconnect between what I study and who I am. And I found that the best place for Muslims to explore international relations is through the paradigm of constructivism. Because constructivism takes identity seriously. And if it can take the identities of countries seriously, or of international actors, or why not take the identity of the researcher also seriously? So this whole dichotomy between subject and object, which is so fundamental to constructivism, was resolved when I factor the identity of the subject. So what you're doing now is that when you look at international relations, you're basically looking at how identity mediates the construction of interests and pursuit of interests. But what we don't realize is that there is no objective understanding of identity. So what somebody may think is a positive identity, others might perceive that as a negative identity. So the subject's identity also plays a role in how they perceive the identity of the international actors. So that is, I think, my biggest contribution to IR theory. And I modified constructivism to recognize that what I call it is that one of the things that IR suffers from is ontological dogmatism. What I mean by ontological dogmatism is that, see, Joe Nye and Bob Cohen's book on interdependence, the argument was initially that the world is anarchical. And in an anarchical world, power is important. And that's the whole realist paradigm, that the world is anarchical. It's a state where everyone is at war with each other. And we have to essentially accumulate power in order to be safe. The only difference that Kenneth Waltz makes is by arguing that anarchy is a structural effect. So he introduces structural theory into realism, making it structural realism. And so he argues that anarchy is a structural condition. The idealists debated this by questioning the ontology of the realist by saying, no, the world is not anarchical, the world is interdependent. And because the world is interdependent, you can rely on cooperation, you can rely on international law, you can rely on alliances and other institutions, and you don't have to rely on power alone. But they lost the debate. The realists continued to dominate. So there was this new trend in the US where they said, okay, let's concede the ontology to the realists and assume that the world is anarchical. And therefore this book that came out, it became very famous, Cooperation Under Anarchy. So the argument was that the world is anarchical, fine, we concede. This is what Bob Cohen said, okay, fine, I concede that the world is anarchical structurally, but I can show to you that even under anarchy we can have cooperation, right? So I come across and I say, look, there is this problem that we seem to look at things in a binary fashion, this or that. And I argue that it can vary from place to place, region to region. So what you really need to understand is that the world is like a system. Some systems are stable, some systems are contested. So in stable systems, I argue that you can really use rational choice theory and understand it to a great extent. Whereas it is in the contested system where identity and other norms come into play. So I argue that power is therefore far more complex. You don't understand power just in terms of materials, that is guns and gold. There is more to power than guns and gold, which is ideas. So I come up with this idea of constitutive power. Actors which have strong identity also have power. Power of conviction, power of value. So I take this metric where I talk about material power and constitutive power. Constitutive power comes from your identity. There are two kinds of rules in the world. One is a rule which is regulatory. You can do this, you can't do that. And then there is a constitutive rule which comes from your identity, like in chess. When you say this is a knight, the knight is defined by the rule that says it goes like this, 2.5 steps. So identity is like a constitutive rule. It defines who you are or what you can do. Okay? So I argue that when you look at international relations, you can look at power as composed of gold and guns and power composed of norms and value. So I come up with a 4x4 matrix where there are actors who have high power and high identity, high power and low identity, low power and low identity, and low identity and high power. So in the matrix, an actor which has both high power, which means gold and guns, and high identity is a tiger. The tiger can do what it wants, what you would call a hegemon, a dominant. And then you have strong identity but less power. I call that a cub. It can grow into a tiger when it becomes stronger, but it's a baby tiger. And then I look at a paper tiger, which has a lot of power but no identity. Like China, I'll fill the matrix after. So you have a paper tiger which has lots of power, but no identity, no values, no direction, no constitution. So I argue that just power does not give purpose. So actors which have weak identity don't have any purpose. Even if they have a lot of power, they won't be effective in the system. And then a mouse, which has no power, no identity. So I applied this to the Middle East and the pursuit of their foreign policies towards Jerusalem. So I found that Israel was a tiger. It had a lot of power and very strong Jewish identity. And that's why it was so purposeful in its action. And I argue that as long as Israelis, Jews have a strong Jewish identity, they will remain a tiger. I found Iran to be the cub. Iran had a strong identity but didn't have the material power to. That's why they were pursuing the nuclear weapon. So if they have power, then they will grow into becoming a tiger. In my research, which is from 67 to 97, I found Saudi Arabia as a paper tiger. It had all the weapons, all the gold, all the oil, but no purpose. The purpose of the government is regime protection. They have no foreign policy purpose, no regional purpose. And therefore I felt that Saudi Arabia was a paper tiger and it had no impact whatsoever in the Arab-Israeli conflict with regards to Jerusalem. It was only Iran which was pushing. Iran is the only country which actually recognizes Jerusalem Day and celebrates it, and they were supporting Hamas against Israel in those days. And then I found Jordan as the mouse. Jordan has no capacity, and I don't think they have a clear identity. The Jordanians don't know whether they are Arabs or Jordanians or Palestinians. Right? On the international front at that time, I argued that the United States was the tiger, and I argued that Japan and Soviet Union were saber tigers. They had capacities, but no purpose. They could not have any. And then you could fill the cubs with lots of cubs. Iran, Israel would become a cub on an international level. The rest of the world was not most of it.
Even Turkey?
Yeah. This was 1967 to 97. It was not. Under Erdogan, I would put Turkey in the capacity of cub, where it has a strong purpose and identity, but not the capacity to actually do the material capacities. So I argue that the weaker your identity, the more rational you become. That is my main contribution. The weaker your identity, the more rational you become. So you can't discard rational choice theory, because rational choice theory will explain the behavior of all people with no identity. Because they are pursuing material interests, they will minimize cost, maximize benefit. So rational choice, therefore, should not be discarded. But constructivism becomes useful to explain actors whose identity is very strong. And so you can use rational choice to explain how Mauritius will conduct its economic policy or foreign policy, but you cannot use rational choice to explain how Hamas will behave. Or how Iran will conduct its foreign policy, because the identity factor comes in there and plays a strong role. So, but I do argue that there is such a thing as a strong identity and a weak identity. And so that is where the power of ideas, the power of value comes in. And it is in that segment that I slot my study of Islam and the role it plays in international politics as potential source of strong identity. So with this metric, you can put in anything that you want. Like, for example, you could look at transnational movements, which is a tiger, which is a cow, which is a mouse, and you can then decide how you want. Like now, you would put ISIS as a tiger, and Al-Qaeda would be the cub, right? And then there are other Sufi movements all in the mouse category. Right now, in my opinion, they are not having any global impact in that sense. So that was my work in IR theory that I started. But after 9/11, I got involved in a lot of geopolitics. So I do several things now. Whenever I can find time, I do Islamic political thought. So I've written a few papers on Islamic political theory. I did a book on Islam and democracy. From the Muslim perspective, I think that there are only 4 or 5 other people who have done as much work on Islam and democracy as I have done in the last 20 years, which is Abdul Karim Surush to some extent. And a lot of my arguments have been used by various governments who, whenever they felt the need to make the case that Islam and democracy are compatible. Another area in which I work is on Islam in America. So I have a book on Muslims in America. I look at the way they trend. But in the case of Islam in America, I'm not an observer, I'm also a participant. So I am deeply engaged in shaping the identity of American Muslims. I want to have an impact on how Muslims in America define themselves. So I'm heavily involved in that conversation. I'm a public intellectual, which means I write lots of op-eds on TV, and then I do radio interviews, and now I do videos on YouTube sometimes. I also give Jummah khutbahs and have suhbahs in my house. And lately, the last 4 years, I've been working on a book on Hassan and his role in politics. So if you know the hadith, it says, Kataba Allah wal ihsan ala kulli shay. Allah has ordered ihsan in everything. So I ask, why not in politics? So how will you do politics if you were a Muslim? If Sufis were to govern the world, how would it look? So the argument that I'm making is that Muslims should stop talking about Islamic State and start talking about the state of Ihsan. And there's a pun there because Ihsan is a state, it is hal. The Sufi language of hal and maqam. Maqam is a stage that you reach in your mystical. Maqam is darajat. The highest maqam is maqam al-mahmud. The stage that Prophet Muhammad has reached where he can ask God to forgive him on the day of judgment. So different Sufis believe that they are at a different maqam, very location or station in life. But at every maqam you have a different hal, your condition or your state of being. So when you are in a state of ihsan, then you pray as if you see God. So that's why I call it state of ihsan, like punning on the term. So for example, the Arabic of both would be Dawla al-Ihsan or Hal fil Ihsan, like that. So the state of Ihsan. And what I did was, in that book, well, one thing that I did was to re-articulate the theory of Ihsan, and I found that the Sufis have made it very apolitical and asociological. So I provide a summary of how Sufis have, from the beginning of Islam till now, understood Ihsan and critique it. And then I do a second reading of Ihsan to show how Ihsan can be applied from cosmology to worldview, bringing it from cosmology to worldview. And then I do basically a genealogy of Islamic political philosophy and thought. So what I did was I created 4 stereotypes of Islamic political thinkers and said there are 4 types of Islamic political thinkers. Those who are jurists, those who are theologians, those who are philosophers, and those who are oddballs. Oddballs, those who don't fit into any mold. So basically, I took Farabi and looked at his philosophy and advanced a critique of his philosophy. Then I looked under the category of jurists. I looked at Mawardi, and I looked at his theory of Khilafah. You will find that I just don't like him at all. He was like a policy wonk, like someone who worked for SETA and do whatever the other guy says, he will write. Or you have one now Mufti who makes everything halal, right? What's it called? You have an Islamic scholar in Turkey, whatever AKP does, he makes it halal. Yeah, that kind of so Mawardi was also like that. Whatever the Caliph wanted, he made it halal. So I find his theory of Khilafah very problematic because what he did was he made history sacred. Basically, he took what happened during the period of the Khulafa Rashidin and made it sacred. Those are historical events, but he sacralized them, protecting it from critical thinking and preventing Muslims from advancing. And you cannot disagree with the Khulafa Rashidin, otherwise you become a kafir. So how will you think? What lessons will you draw from their political governance? Nothing. You have to automatically assume that everything that they did was right, that is a perfect system, that is how everybody should apply. And if you don't do that, then you're not a Muslim. So there is no room for critical thinking, no room for learning, no room for empirical analysis, and therefore you destroy and kill political philosophy in Islam. So that's all Mawardi's contribution. Then I looked at Ibn Taymiyyah and his work. I obviously don't like it at all. And the whole idea of Sharia-based politics and defining an Islamic state as a state that imposes Sharia. And then I looked at Ibn Khaldun, which I liked a lot, obviously, and talked about Ibn Khaldun and empiricism. But I also said that there is another genre of Islamic political thought that Muslims have not taken seriously as political thought, and that is the work of the Sufis. And a lot of people, I had kind of a contest on Facebook, and lots of professors were saying, you should do Ghazali. But when I read Ghazali, I realized that Ghazali was a realist who later became a Sufi. So most of his political work is done while he was a realist. And also he was also like Mawardi in the beginning of his career, a political hitman. So his boss, Nizam al-Mulk, hired him to basically attack the Ismailis and attack everybody. So he was a polemicist, writing on behalf of the state, like Delhi Sadat. Attack Gulen, attack PKK, attack PYD, and that's all they do every day, attack America. So it's like that, produce this pro-government, anti-opponent literature. That's what Ghazali was doing in the beginning for Nizam al-Mulk. That's why he got disgusted with his own work and he left and became a Sufi. So I could not find lyrical work of his after he became a Sufi. Most of his work after he became Sufi, Ihya ul-Deen and Alchemy of Happiness, etc. So I did not do Ghazali, and I did basically Sheikh Sadi. So I looked at Gulistan Dostan, I looked at Sheikh Sadi's work and his advice to governors and advice to government, and I realized that there is a lot that Sufis can learn from it. And so the last chapter of the book is based on the role that Sufism can play, is based on a lot of poetry of Sheikh Sadi. Like for example, I argue that there are verses in the Quran which say that the best way to respond to evil is by doing good. And then there is a hadith which says, La darar wa la darar, do not respond to evil and do not do evil. So based on some of these Islamic sources and traditions, I argue that mystical politics would not be that which is self-regarding, but it will be other-regarding, where you measure the success of your policies by the good you do for the other rather than for the self. So you move from pursuit of national interest to pursuit of national character and national development. So you won't be obsessed with what is the national interest, but rather you will be interested in what is national character. And so there are lots more stuff like that in the final chapter, but that's where my current work is.
So there is what shall we do? I mean, to reinvent or to develop Muslim society, Muslim world in modern age. I mean, Muslims are very, forgotten that they are backwards. They have very high degree of dogmatism in terms of orthodoxy. Take it Sunni orthodoxy in Arab world, in Turkey or in Pakistan, or Shia orthodoxy. And in the construction of this orthodoxy, for example, Ihya and Ghazali is a very turning point at the beginning of 11th, 12th century. After that, free thinking, discussion, debate, and around that politics also are discussed in a very free circumstances before that. Even though, they have some, sanctions during the times of sultans, Abbasids or Emevids. But anyway, Fakir, for example, Abu Hanifa, or some philosophers think very freely. But after Ghazali and after the construction of very high, degree of Sufism, the orthodoxy is taken as very given. We say fitrat, the nature of human, the nature of true Muslim. So it is not questionable, it is not open to discussion. If you do such a thing, you are, excluded from the society, even you are sometimes you know, doctor, as you are Murtad, going back from the poor lead and Muslim. So even during this, in the last 3 or 4 ages, the West has developed very fast in terms of idea and in terms of meta. So meta and idea is like the story of chicken egg. Which one results in another one? In fact, yeah, constructivism opened a window in that way. I mean, idea and meta, in fact, should be taken together. If you go one side, most probably you will forget the other side. Sufism, for example, go to this way, leave idea and forgetting about the meta. And if you don't have some material instruments, anyway, you will be submissive to others. So how we, go outside of this box, vicious circle?
Well, see, the problem is that the Muslim, I think the question, what should Muslims do? We should abandon that question. Why? Why do we have this false collective identity? And I keep telling people, Muslims keep talking about unity they have. Somebody asked me about Mursi's concept of ittihad. But Muslims only talk about unity. They are not united. They have been divided even before the Prophet ﷺ was buried. And they remain divided. Europeans have come together and created the European Union. They seem to be more united than we are. So they act towards unity. But, like for example, your broad assumption that after Ghazali there was clearly very few instances of as much free thinking before. But also 2 of the greatest Muslim thinkers, in my opinion, came after Ghazali, Ibn Arabi and Ibn Rushd. Both of them opposed Ghazali by more than 100 years, for 35 and the 90. But so there is room. I think what has happened is that there has been a civilization decay in the Muslim world. And the decay is not because of Islam, but Islam also decayed along with the civilization. And the decay in the civilization is the lack of power that you see, lack of economic and military power. And the decay in Islam you can see by the closeness of the Muslim mind. Muslims are so afraid that they have actually no faith in their beliefs. You see, that is the thing. Muslims are afraid that any question will expose their faith. So they are afraid to ask questions. They are afraid of people who ask questions, which I find so strange for a community which seems to value Iman so much. If you really have faith, then why are you so afraid that it will be lost at the first question that is asked about it? Muslims haven't understood that their obsession with against blasphemy and the obsession against people who ask questions, against free thinking, is actually a subconscious fear that our values are weaker, and if we give a chance to our people, they will abandon Islam and run towards the West and become like Westerners. So that is a psychological situation which is post-colonial in condition because of being overcome by the West. And that will only disappear with emerging self-confidence. And increasingly in the Muslim world, even in successful societies, what we see is resentment against the West and not self-confidence. They don't feel confident and they feel resentment against the West.
I think this is because of imperialism.
Yeah, but what is the problem is that because of that resentment, they actually reject all the good things that they can use from the West, which is science and scientific methodology.
This is a matter of construction. of the last 3 centuries. I mean, because the West expanded all over the world, they exploited natural resources, human resources of Africa, Muslim countries, Asia or Latin America. So the biases were constructed in the minds of people. So anyway, if they have something, you can say it very valuable, very good thing, but because of those biases, yeah, they reject.
Yeah, but the point really is that you can reject the West and you can reject Islam, but if you want to compete, which is what this whole story is all about, right? If you want to compete, if you want to resist their influence and their domination with cultural influence necessarily comes political influence and political domination. So the whole point is to resist the political domination, and you cannot resist the political domination if the culture itself is appealing. It's like saying, how do you fight your neighbor if your son is in love with the daughter of the neighbor, right? And so if your entire youth and your next generation is in love with American culture and American way of life, it is very difficult for you to resist it. But the thing is that you have to, I mean, it requires a degree of sophisticated deliberation in the public sphere in the Muslim world, which the Muslim world right now is unwilling to create the freedom for, and those Muslim intellectuals who are capable of providing that level of deliberation are usually in the West or scared and sent off to the West because they are not feeling the freedom. And that is the biggest challenge. So I feel that just as West oppression came from the West, it is possible that the emancipation of the Muslim world will also come from the West.
So
Like the idea of Orientalism.
I would like to remind from Islamic history that I believe in my own the first 4 centuries, I mean beginning from the 8th century at the beginning until at the beginning of the 11th century during Khulafa Rashidin, Amami and Abbasi, Muslims have accumulated something in terms of material things and in terms of ideas and thinking. After the Crusaders, I mean Mongol invasion of Baghdad at the middle of 12th century, after that 4 or 5 centuries, Muslims consumed those accumulated values and materials. And after that, they produce something. After the 12th century until today, just we have consumed.
Some coincides with the Ottoman Empire, right?
In Turkey, for example, we are idealizing Ottoman Empire, but even Ottoman Empire in terms of material things and ideas, they consume what they have found from their predecessors.
Yeah, I mean the Golden Age precedes the Ottoman Empire. And even though you have such a stable empire for 600 years, there's nothing golden about it. I don't know, Muslims have definitely dropped the ball in the battle of ideas, and it has to be intrinsic. My wife was one day, somebody asked me this question, Dr. Khan, do you believe in jinns? So I said, how can I not believe in the jinns? I mean, there's a Surah of Jinn in the Quran, I'm a Muslim. But I personally know only 2 jinns, I said. So the audience, you know 2 jinns? I said, yes, hydrogen and nitrogen. So I joked, I didn't know what to answer that question seriously, right? Do you know? So
I never heard of oxygen.
Okay. So my wife next day tells my son, who was at that time like 12 years old, she says, he was playing a video game, and she says, so Rumi, do you believe in jinns? So he said, are you talking about Dad's joke? She said, no, My wife is a convert to Islam, so she said, I have a very difficult time believing in genes, etc. It weakens my faith. So Rumi said, I have no problems in believing in genes. So she said, how can you do that? So he said, do you believe in gravity? So my wife said, yeah. I said, can you see gravity? No. He said, can you see the effect of gravity? So she said, sometimes. He said, okay, so we hypothesize gravity and accept its existence by looking at the effect of gravity without actually perceiving gravity. So he says, I can think of black holes and I can think of quarks, which are all sub-quantum forces. And from all of this, I think jinn are also a force of nature, like any of these things out there. Your problem is you're imagining jinns like Hollywood imagines jinns, and that's where it becomes more difficult. So what was interesting to me was that he felt the need to think completely and freely and reach his own conclusion. Neither did I scold him or beat him up for coming out with a non-traditional question. And I think that atmosphere, if that is not available to our growing youth to think freely, ask questions, then we will never be able to go. I think that Descartes was right. I mean, all truth begins with doubt. Even the Quran says, La rayba fihi, even the Surah Baqarah also, the Quran actually starts with discussing doubt. So I don't know whether Muslims have not been taught to think critically, especially about the most important thing. The more important the thing is, the more critical you have to be. And if you are not critical, so, and that is very, very important, I think.
One point more, Mr. Professor, I mean, all the time it is in my mind that, we have to think very freely, but another problem that is stemming from the West is that modern nation state, they constructed many nation states in the Muslim world. So any nation state in the Muslim world, anyhow, have constructed their own kind of politics in terms of monarchical or in terms of dictatorship or democratic or some, as in the case of Iraq or Syria, party rule, but in terms in a Ba'athist sense. So, I mean, if you want to be critical, anyway, any idea or any proposition will be related at the end to politics. So the political structure in the Muslim world at the beginning don't like this.
Yeah, they don't like it
So
all the time.
you don't have any choice, and at this stage, many Muslim candidates for thinking or any research or writing bring immigration to the West, Europe or US or Canada or Australia. I think you understand what I mean.
I know. But the question
when they go there, there emerge another problem. They learn those society, Western society, they adopt their culture, they become member of those new society, and maybe they are not aware of that, but they start to think in international terms in the interest of their own society, American society, European society, Australian society. So if they say anything in the realm of Islam, this is also very strange to us in the Middle East.
See, the thing is that it is not unconscious, it is a self-unconscious thing. Like every time I meet with Muslims, they seem to have only one agenda, which is to destroy America. Everywhere in the Muslim world. Doesn't matter whether it's a terrorist organization or a graduate student. And I'm looking at them and saying, I left you guys because you wouldn't let me think. And the only people who respect me are Americans. who treat me as their equal, who give me complete freedom to think whatever I want to think. And you want to destroy this only thing which allows Muslims to think freely about Islam. You know, the only place where Muslims can think freely about Islam is the only thing. Basically, you want no place on earth to remain where you can ask freely questions of important things.
So the problem is not personal, but very structural.
Well, it's not necessarily structural because there are lots of Muslims in the West who propagate the same thing. Not everybody is enjoying the benefits of freedom or taking what do you call the opportunity, exploiting the opportunity to ask questions very freely, etc. I remember having a conversation with Abdul Karim Subur, and I spent a lot of time with him, 2 days, basically one whole day, and then driving him to the airport and back when I was a grad student. So I asked him lots of interesting questions, and he left along. His answers they're still with me. This is more than 15 years ago. Like one of the questions I had asked him was, why is it that it is wrong to disagree with the Prophet? Because if you disagree with the Prophet, you become kafir straight away. So I said, in the empirical sense, why is it to disagree? So he looked at me and he said, you answer the question, I know you have the answer. I said, no, I don't have the answer. He said, yes, you have the answer, you just don't have the courage to say it. So he would not answer, and he just forced me to go on and ask that question. But what was interesting was that I tried asking that question to ulama in the Muslim world, and they're like ready to jump up and down and shout and say they have only one answer, which is kufr, etc., etc. The question that we really want, the question really is the Prophet ﷺ's interpretation of the Quran the only interpretation, or is it one of the interpretations? Can we have, because we live so many hundreds of years away from this place. We live in an entirely different world. It's completely incomparable to the desert of 7th century Arabia. We live in a postmodern, post-industrial world, right? Actually, in my pocket on this, I have 35 different tafsirs, 70,000 hadiths, all on this iPhone, which is a different world completely. So in this world, why should there not be alternative and valid understanding of the religious text, right? And I said this next day to him while talking, he said, exactly. So he had no answer to me, but he said, this is the better question. I know this was in your mind, but you didn't have the courage to ask it. And I'm still struggling with that question, right? But what I'm trying to say is that those are the questions that everybody should be asking in the Muslim world. And I think if Muslims continue to ask these questions, then people will. There's a Turkish economist at Duke University. Do you know what his name is?
Acemoglu. Tarık Acemoglu.
Acemo.
How do you spell it?
Acemoglu.
ACEMO.
No, he wrote this whole book as to that Islamic law was the reason why the Middle East is underdeveloped.
No,
Quran.
Acemo, economist.
Quran, Timur Quran. I never see Turks talking about him at all. Right? He's very famous. He's a Duke. He's one of the top economists in the world. And he's very popular. But he has these kind of views, right? Because he basically argues that Islamic law has stunted development and growth in the Muslim world. So instead of engaging with him, they just pretend as if he doesn't exist. They don't cite him, they don't read him, they don't invite him to speak here. They bring other people, like Palestinians all the time, Dabashi and this and that. Anybody who's bashing America immediately gets a free ticket to the US. But he's providing a very interesting critical theory, which if you engage, maybe he's wrong, maybe he's right, but it requires engagement, right? And I don't think he would have written a book like that, sitting even at Bosphorus University or something. So one of the things, I think the key is this freedom to think and ask questions. And, I ended my talk yesterday by citing this hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, he who does ijtihad and gets it right gets 2 ajr for it. And if he gets it wrong, he still gets won reward. Why has this civilization forgotten that in our tradition, even thinking wrongly is something that God rewards, because ultimately the thing that makes us human is our capacity to think. There is no doubt about it. Sufis will argue that it is about love also. But thinking and love are connected. And if we constrain thinking, and if we limit the capacity to think, we basically reduce our humanity. We constrain our, less than human in my view. And that is why, the reason why the West is where it is not because of its imperial policies, etc. Even Muslims were imperialist. When they could, they conquered anybody, they looted. Only the mosque, the mosque in front of Eminunu, that bankrupted the Ottomans. And you know why? Because only that mosque was built without a wall. All other great mosques that you built, you looted other societies. Literally robbed them of their hard work, brought their money here and built these mosques. So this is imperialism. This is all kinds of decadry at the international level which you don't acknowledge. The Arabs looted the whole of North Africa, colonized. Sudanese think they are Arabs. So we did colonization and imperialism wherever we did. Once we could not do it, we are resenting the fact. But that's not what makes the West. I think what makes the West so powerful and enduringly so is the recognition of the fundamental principle of freedom. It is freedom that makes us human, and freedom from these constraints from government to think. That's why it's very important.
But from this point, I'm very sorry, my friends also may have some questions here. I would like to understand the roots of extremism, some so-called Islamic terrorist organization, like ISIL, like Al-Qaeda, because some people in Muslim world are unable to find any solution to Quran. And in that case, freedom also is interpreted in terms of physical force. So they try to use physical force against the West so that they hope they will awaken Islamic world and there will be a great holy war, and the imperialism of West is going to be, last in the Muslim world. So in that case, I mean, we have to understand through this way also the roots of extremism and some terrorist organizations.
The question is that you are saying that there are geopolitical reasons why terrorism exists in Muslim. I mean, look, when the Soviet Union was in Afghanistan, the Afghans fought the Soviet Union for 10, 12 years. There was no suicide bombing at all. America shows up and suddenly there is suicide bombing all over Pakistan and Afghanistan. There was no suicide bombing in Iraq under oppression that Saddam Hussein did for so many years. America comes and suddenly they are committing suicide bombing. So there is something about America that triggers a very aggressive response from Muslims. I don't know what it is, but what is also clear to me that China also occupies Tibet, and the Chinese are not committing terrorism, the Tibetans are not resorting to suicide bombing or terrorism anywhere in the world. I also know that discrimination and racism in Europe affects Sikhs, affects Hindus also. They experience the same racism that Muslims do. There is Muslims who are terrorists in Europe and not Hindus and not Sikhs. So terrorism seems to come very easily to Muslims, not so much to other religious people. So under similar conditions of exploitation, similar conditions of imperial domination, Muslims are responding to terrorism and the West, other said religions are not. Number one question for Muslims. The second question is that this terrorism is not necessarily directed at Westerners. 90% of all victims of terrorism are Muslims. So this theory that it is against Western imperialism cannot stand up to empirical scrutiny. They are using terrorism against anybody and everybody in sectarian warfare. Shia Sunni battles, they are using terrorism. Country to country battle, they are using terrorism. The biggest producer of terrorism clearly has been Pakistan, and it was directed at India. There is no Western imperialism coming from India. In fact, Pakistan has been an instrument of Western imperialism rather than being a victim of Western imperialism. So I don't buy this argument that we are crazy because you go to the West. You're crazy with everybody else also. And because there seems to be some kind of religious justification. I find this country, I'm going to say something on tape, because I don't give a shit anymore now. But do you realize that you support Hamas and you oppose PKK? There is no difference in Hamas and PKK. Hamas is fighting for a nation state from occupation from Israel. PKK is fighting for a nation state from Turkish occupation. At least Israelis allow the Hamas to speak their language. You won't even allow them to speak their language and recognize their language. There's no difference. One is a hero and the other is a terrorist. So the moral inconsistencies of Muslims themselves. When Hezbollah is fighting Israel, they are heroes. When they support Hafez al-Assad, they are terrorists. Right? So that means, where is your moral compass? The same organization can go from being Hezbollah to Hizbul Shaitan. So that's the problem with the Muslim world. If these people were just killing Westerners, I'm sure they would all be very happy and quiet about it. Just because it's turning inside out. Now the bombs are blowing in Istanbul and Ankara, and suddenly. What was interesting to me is listening to Turkish intellectuals be critical of American language on war on terror. And now Erdogan uses the same language. He talks about in the same language as Bush used to talk about in war on terror. And the same critique now doesn't apply to this man. So then when I listen to moral critique from the Muslim world, to me that is stupid. And I don't take it seriously at all because it's hypocritical. Because when I was in the US, I was just as critical of Bush when he was using these terms in war on terror as I am now of Muslims who use the same term. So if you go back and take my record, you can see this. That I was doing it because America allowed me the freedom to be critical of Bush even at the peak. My first article after George Bush became president was American Muslims ambushed by Bush. And I have written lots of things, and I've written directly attacking Bush, alcoholic preaching abstinence on his weapons, trying to impose sanctions on Iran for nuclear weapons. But in America, 6,000, 10,000 nuclear weapons, and we are preaching to other countries not to have nuclear weapons. So this is the whole morality. Muslims are sympathetic to terrorism. So why they deserve to just suffer it? You have to have zero tolerance on these issues. They are theological. People don't recognize the works of Ibn Taymiyyah, the works of Abdul Wahhab. All of these contribute to hatred and intolerance of other Muslims, logicians, philosophers, or Sufis, etc. The most dominant theology in the world today is Salafi theology. And all it teaches is intolerance. Intolerance towards everybody. And then forget about non-Muslims. It's about intolerance for Muslims. And if this is our religion, then this is our reality. It is. And even this whole discussion about refugees, migration to Europe. I mean, the Europeans are doing an incredible job. I was listening to a Turkish professor's presentation about Europe. And I asked him, how do you think Turks will respond if Syrian population reaches 7% in Turkey? If Turkey becomes 7% Syrian, and not like you keep them in tents out there, but a pathway to citizenship. You know, and you know that they are all going to become citizens and they will all vote in the next election, and you could actually have a political party in Arabic, demanding your Arabic be taught in schools and in universities.
In few years, most probably
Will happen, but what will be the attitude, right? Will they then prove themselves to be better than Germans and French and Scandinavians in their acceptance of the other? I would love to see that. You know, so this whole idea that we are morally superior but materially inferior is, I think, needs to be re-examined by the Muslim world. That's where critical thinking comes, because ultimately critical thinking benefits those who employ it. All this critique of the West only benefits the West, even though we realize it. If your critique of the West is ordinary, nobody will take a look at it. If tomorrow you write a critique, like you write a dissertation with a very profound critique of some American institution, I guarantee you within a year or two you will be teaching at Harvard or Yale, and guess who will be benefiting from your critique? Those same very institutions in America that you're criticizing, they will make adjustments based on your critique because it is valid. That's what people don't understand. They will not stifle you or shut you down because you're critiquing. They will engage with your critique and say, wow, he has a point. And then, if America's Congress is not working, they will probably make you in charge of how to fix it. And they will give you whatever you need. And that is what you need to do here. That's what I thought this conference to bash West. Instead of that, if they had spent all this money on how to improve social sciences in Turkey, I think it would have been better spent. You know, use the same critical thing to look at your universities, look at your PhD programs, and try to improve it.
I guess we should
Also,
turn the video. You know, we are experiencing a very sensitive period.
I know, that's why I didn't want to answer the question when I said what I.
And I had to leave because I have a meeting with the Wall Street in downtown, but I will be back and participate. Şimdi ne yapacağız? After meeting'den sonra